Are the Florida Gators getting ready to make a move on the offensive line in the 2025 recruiting class?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. I am Brandon Olsen. Joining me is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. And before we get started, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And Brian, I know that I introduced you as the Locked On recruiting insider. However, you are also the host of Locked On Seminoles. Disgustingly enough at that. But the first player that we're talking about is very relevant for that. It is offensive lineman Solomon Thomas. Where would you put the likelihood right now that the Florida Gators can successfully finish the flip on Solomon Thomas from the Florida State Seminoles?
I think that there are three teams that are all right there. Then Miami's kind of an outlier. Florida State, and LSU, all pretty equal. I know he's committed to Florida State, but I just consider that a public announcement. I don't really put a lot of stock in the commitment because he's taken multiple trips to Gainesville. And I know people in Gainesville think they've got a great shot to flip him. So I'm not feeling great about Florida State's shot, but I think everybody's below 50%. This is a down-to-the-wire National Signing Day deal, so like 30% for each of those schools and maybe Miami 10%. That's kind of where I would be.
What do you think is obviously, with every kid, there's a bunch of different factors in here. What do you think for Solomon Thomas it's kind of coming down to? Because I know that one of the things with LSU and why people think that it might not be LSU as much is because he wants to be closer to home. But what do you think ultimately is going to be the final decision for Solomon Thomas here?
Relationships. He's talked about that. That leads to the development. Those two go hand in hand. And he is very serious about his craft. Make no mistake about it. But Solomon is a guy that wants to feel comfortable with the people around him. He talked about Florida's coaches, Florida State's coach, like by name. He's got great relationships with all the programs we're mentioning here. Miami, Florida State, and LSU. That being stated, UF is right down the road and says Florida State. I would think they have the biggest edge because he is proximity-wise. He's in Jacksonville, a couple hours from UF, maybe 2.5 from Florida State. I forget the number, but they're convenient. Now, the question is, can he have a visit to Miami or LSU or something happen to help them? I don't know, but the relationship with those two seems good. But he always mentions the other two schools a lot, too. So he's a very hard kid to read long-term.
Yeah, and another player that is currently committed elsewhere that you have a little familiarity with as well is Tavaris Dice, currently committed to Auburn. Auburn was reportedly mad that Tavaris Dice even took the official visit to Gainesville this past weekend. I know that last Monday we were told that, hey, this visit's kind of up in the air right now after his most recent visit to Auburn. Auburn doesn't want him to go. He's considering canceling it because of Auburn. He ended up taking the visit. They're reportedly mad about it. I feel like Tavaris Dice's recruitment is kind of 50-50 here. And maybe I'm wrong in thinking that, but I also feel like when a kid is committed somewhere and then we go, oh, this is a truly 50-50 battle, I feel like they don't often stay with that spot that they're initially committed to.
I think kids are fickle. I don't disagree with your statement. The grass is always greener is an old statement that's been around. And I don't know. I know Dice has been to Auburn like 5-6 times. He is very comfortable on the plains, and it's about a 2-hour drive from his home to the Auburn campus. That being stated, UF has won over a lot of kids from Atlanta for as long as I can remember. It's a pretty easy sell. So if he continues with the relationship building with UF after the visit, and he doesn't completely shut it down this summer going into fall camp, then I would think there's a better chance that he leaves than even what I do right now. And again, he took the visit. There has to be interest or you wouldn't take the UF visit. So, and I'm sure you've heard this, Brandon. They need offensive linemen at UF. So, did you not know that? Just letting you know. Just letting you know. So they probably have the ability to push. Hey, look, we've got playing time here. Auburn does too. Like they need offensive linemen. So it's an interesting situation. He's looking out for his best interest because both those schools need guys that do what he does. So good situation for Dice.
Yeah, I feel like while we're talking about Dice and him looking for schools that need him and have the situation for him, I feel like one of the big selling points for Florida could be, hey, we don't have a blue chip offensive lineman committed right now or any for that matter. Auburn has a few offensive linemen committed where you can kind of give the selling point to Tavaris Dice of you can be our O-line one in this cycle and maybe contribute early.
That's not a bad sell. A lot of kids want to play early. Why not? So he can play left tackle too. This kid's athletic. He's very, very athletic. He's 295, about 6'5". He fits the profile, right? So now the question is, can Florida get over the hump with all the negativity around the program and stuff? Because I'm sure they're getting negatively recruited to death. I would be if I was Auburn. So I don't know how that works, and every kid's going to take it differently. But again, he took the visit. You know, UF has to at least be in the running.
Yeah, they might be getting negatively recruited, but hey, still got him on campus for the OV. When he knew that Auburn didn't want him to go, still got him to actively make the decision of they don't want me there, but I still want to go. So, hey, that's a decent – I'll take that as a minor win for Florida there. One last offensive lineman to talk about is John Mills from California. He seems pretty set on leaving California. He took an official visit with Florida the week of the 7th for June. He was his player host was Jake Slaughter, starting center. I know that they hung out a lot. I know that he had a great weekend in Gainesville. And then this past weekend, he took an official visit to Texas. And he said weeks ago, hey, I'm going to take all my OVs, which Texas was his last official visit. Said, I'm going to take all my OVs, wait a week or two, and then make a decision. Personally, I feel like he's Texas bound here, but I don't think Florida's out of it at all either. What's your take on the recruitment and situation in general?
This is a kid from San Francisco visiting Gainesville, but his other visits are Nebraska, Cal, Washington, and Texas. His visit list is wild. I have never seen anything quite like it, what we're seeing in this cycle, but he might take the cake because that is literally from Seattle to Gainesville. That's wild, bro. So here's the deal. Texas is a hard school to beat in visits. They got the NIL package, the whole nine, got a really good program. I'm with you. It makes me weary, but he hasn't committed there yet. They can get through this next week. They might have a shot. So offensive linemen generally make a decision a little earlier, but let's see if they can get through this next week. Again, Texas has a much deeper depth chart. Florida's a little easier to sell. Don't be shocked any which way he goes.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this, Brian, but Florida Gators need offensive linemen. Yeah, like crazy stuff. We're hoping that they make some moves on the offensive line. They could be making a move at receiver, possibly as soon as next week-ish, early July. We'll see about that one. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by eBay Motors. With passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. For the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Joining me is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. And Brian, we've got a few players that we've already talked about some extensively here. Nan Montgomery is the first one that I wanted to talk about. I sent it out to the Subtext insiders weeks ago of just, hey, I think Nan's going to be a Florida Gator when it's all said and done. He was supposed to officially visit LSU last week. It was kind of weird. He went to LSU for a camp or a workout type deal, was supposed to officially visit, and then he canceled it. And that was a weird thing there. It felt like a two-horse race. Even when LSU was kind of in it, it felt like a two-horse race for me between Florida and Penn State. Where do you land on Nan Montgomery's eventual decision?
This one's unique because he's not originally from South Florida, despite playing for Central and Miami. It's Delaware, Rhode Island. I forget which school it is. And Penn State needs receivers. They are not exactly killing it at the position, being very kind. He's got a lot easier trip now to go to UF, though, than he does all the way to Penn State. It's not a very easy school to get to in general. I don't know what's going to happen there because the two schools have so many different things about them. I've heard UF more than Penn State, so unless something happened that I don't know about, I like the Gators too. But Sider, the recruiter for Penn State, is the guy recruiting. He might be the best recruiter in the country. He's the running back coach at Penn State. I'm weary anytime they're involved with a kid when he's the guy recruiting them. So, and it's not like Florida's passing game is the most exciting. Now, they're very accurate, but it's not the most exciting. So I don't know what they're pitching to him, if they're playing him outside, inside, or whatever. I haven't talked to Nan about it, but he's really, really talented. It's a kid I've seen several times. So good luck to him either place. He'll probably play early at either school.
You mentioned, he could play inside, outside, very talented. Is Nan Montgomery a kid where you can take the commitment and say, we got a wide receiver one in the 2025 cycle?
I don't know if I go wide receiver one by Ohio State standards, but by anybody else's, it's possible because he's got speed. He'll catch the ball down the field. And those are the guys that change football games. They change how many defenders are in the box. They change first downs. They change coverage. How do we defend this guy? Do we double? Those are the kind of guys that cause defensive coordinators to retire early. So he's got speed and he's got hands. He's a playmaker. So Penn State, Florida, one of them probably going to end up with that young man that's going to make some plays down the field.
And Kobe Howard is another receiver that we've talked about quite a bit. We haven't talked about him in a little while. What's your latest on him?
UF is what I've heard up until this point. I haven't spoken to him here recently, but I'd imagine that decision would happen sometime this summer and officially be done with it, barring something unforeseen. I know he'd like to have it done before his season starts. So, man, he can play too. Another kid that can take the top off, very competitive kid, with a lot of speed. It'd be interesting because if they get him with a couple of the other kids they've got, they're going to have one of the fastest receiver corps in the United States. It'll be really, really good. I'm not saying it's Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer-like, but it wouldn't be far from it. Now they just got to get the quarterbacks to get him the ball, but they're headed in the right direction, receiver. It's surprising considering how they threw the ball last year, threw short so much. Give them credit. They're getting a lot of good players on campus.
Yeah, I mean, got a lot of good players on campus. Both of us feel pretty good about Nan Montgomery being a Florida Gator. There's a few names that you can throw in there as potential additions there. Kobe Howard, is he the kind of receiver that for you moves the needle for the Florida Gators? If you take four receivers, which is what Florida wants, ideally, where do you think Kobe Howard would be? Is he a guy that you could take him as your second highest ranked receiver and you are happy with that? Or would you prefer him be more of a 3 or 4?
I think he's as good or better than Montgomery. So I love Kobe Howard. I saw him as a freshman and saw 3 plays, and I said, that's a Power 5 kid. He was running by guys that were 3 years older than him. Excuse me. So that puts it in perspective. He's really, really good at making the spectacular catch, too. I would take him in every class. Guys like him don't come along all the time.
Cortez Mills is the last receiver that we're going to talk about today. Yesterday, he announced, I love how he did it too, because he kind of just tweeted out, I am no longer taking a visit to the Miami. It was a fun tweet to see, just to watch that one pop up randomly in the middle of the morning.
I saw that and thought the same. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is very, very out of nowhere. And it does feel like Clemson picked up a lot of momentum. I know that Florida Gators fans still want to add him. I personally, when he came to Gainesville, I was like, hey, I think he's more likely to go to Miami than Florida when it comes time to actually commit. Personally, now I'm thinking he's Clemson bound, but I'm curious about your thoughts. I feel like you're more clued in on Cortez than I would be.
From what I've heard, Miami is not going to take him. They're playing big game hunting with Jamie French, Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown. Good luck. I think they should take Cortez. That's their decision, whatever, but he's probably going to end up at Clemson from all the scuttlebutt that I've heard you as well. So can UF overcome that? Possibly. It's not like Clemson's passing game was unbelievable last year either. So that offense found a way to shoot itself in the foot, much like a team in Gainesville. So it's interesting. I don't know where did Clemson come from on that? This is bizarre. Even for recruiting,
Andre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins.
But those guys haven't been there in a while, though. Like, it's just their receiving last couple of years has been pedestrian by and large by their standards. Let's be clear. They got good players, but nobody that's dominated. So maybe he sees the opportunity to be a guy. That's the other way to look at it. So good luck to him if that's what happens. But UF, again, he fits the profile. He's like Kobe. It's like Nation. He could run by guys. So they're looking at those kind of players who are trying to beat teams down the field.
I'm curious because, I named DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins. They also had, like T. Higgins, Justin Ross was a big name as a freshman and then got injured and things fell off. But you responded with, those guys haven't been there in a while. They were there more recently than Florida won national championships. And I feel like we talk about winning national championships as a big selling point for Florida. And obviously, personal player development, winning football games are two different things. But I don't know. Do you say that about Florida now if you're negatively recruiting Florida, where you go, yeah, but it's been a long time. You were two probably when Florida was winning those titles.
That is true. And it's what some of the people use against Miami. Their last title was 2001. It's even further back than it is for UF. So it's part of it, man. If teams can take a shot at you, they're going to take a shot at you. With Florida, Miami, obviously it's easy to recruit, closer to home, blah, blah, blah. They get most of their kids from inside the Sunshine State. But at the end of the day, what have you done lately carries a lot of weight. Gators got 5 commitments. And it's not like they're not putting in effort on the trail. Florida should never be at 5 commitments at this point of the year. They should not. It's an easy job. People know that Billy is on the hot seat, and it's because they haven't produced kids, running 2 guys out on the field with the same number, stuff like that. It tends to cause problems. So, look, they got to prove it on the field to keep these kids. And I told somebody else earlier today, Florida's the school. If they come out and do better than we think they're going to do, they may not get the kids now, but they'll have a bunch of kids committing like October and November because it's UF. It's not a hard sell. Even the people I talked to on my Locked On Seminole show, like, look, it's an easy gig. The Florida job's easier than the Florida State job, in my opinion. That also ruffles a lot of feathers in my neck of the woods, but it in my opinion, it is because it's in the Southeastern Conference. So you can take it however you like. They need to do well at the beginning of the season. They got to win the Miami game. If they lose the Miami game, I want to be on this show for an hour straight just having fun. Because
if they lose the Miami game, I might be on the show for like a week straight, just nonstop live streaming here. I do like, because you said, Florida's an easier job than Florida State because it's in the SEC. So you get to recruit at the SEC level, but you also have to play an SEC schedule. We saw the ACC champions last year not even make the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's wild. Like last year was a weird year. And this year, I mean, I'm not picking UF to go to the playoff by any stretch. Florida State, if I had to pick, would be my team to win the ACC because I just trust their staff. They're good. I'm sure you hate them and all that, but I know you respect them too. That stuff matters to some of these kids. You still want to win. And Florida State's proven they can develop players. So Florida needs all kinds of things to go right. That first month of September and August 31st, the day that the game's played in the Swamp, my goodness, it is just one of those games they have to win. Can you imagine what the locker room's going to be like if it's not like it's just like the whole build up the offseason? That's rough. But I give Florida credit for like scheduling the game. A lot of schools won't do it. Good for UF. playing a home and home with and stuff like that, continuing to play Florida State. That's why college football is great. So good for UF and their administration for making that happen.
Yeah. You also mentioned, Florida wins some games. They can see some guys flip to them or
absolutely.
Outright.
Absolutely.
That's a conversation you're going to be here on tomorrow's show as well. That's a conversation we're going to have that I have that feeling about a very specific player. He's the first guy that we're going to talk about tomorrow. So you don't have to wait that long for it. But you also mentioned just a couple minutes ago that, it depends who's throwing the ball to these receivers. We'll talk about quarterback because that is I want to say it's a little bit of a polarizing subject. And I think that you and I might be on the short end there or the road less traveled when we talk about quarterbacks there. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast. Brian Smith joining me. I am Brandon Olsen. Florida Gators 2024 class, DJ Lagway, top-ranked quarterback in the country. I believe at the end of the season on 24/7, he was the third-rated player in general. 2026, Will Griffin, blue-chip quarterback out of Jesuit right now. What do you think the odds are of Florida flipping a guy like Tramel Jones from Florida State? Again, you are the host of Locked On Seminoles, so it's a very relevant conversation here. If I'm not mistaken, when we first started talking about Tramel Jones, it was that you've seen quite a bit of him in person. You've got a lot of experience with him there. What would you say the odds are for Florida to actually pull off the flip where I don't believe he officially visited Florida, but he was there last week for a workout as well?
This is all about the beginning of the season. I've even talked to him, like he wants to know who the coaches are going to be and all that. So this is going to drag out a while, is my guess. Now, Florida State may want him to make a decision sooner. Like there's a million things going on here. I don't know how it's going to work because you don't want to go into the season without a quarterback dead in to your class. Tramel wants to see Florida play. Do you blame him? I don't. I don't know how you fix it. I have no idea how to fix this. Florida State's had him committed for a year too. So maybe even longer than that. It's a really weird situation. I know Florida State has spoken to other quarterbacks. You always keep the irons hot. Everybody does it. But this is getting to the point where you're like, we need to know. I'm not sure when it's going to come to a head, but I would assume before the summer's out. So how can Florida flip him based on how they showed their quarterback play and their offensive style last year? Because everything was just short, dink and dunk passing. Nobody's excited about that. So I don't know how they get it done, but everybody keeps saying, well, he keeps visiting. He keeps visiting, which he does. So it's a really weird recruitment.
Yeah, I show him the Anthony Richardson tape and I say, hey, look at our passing attack throwing the ball deep downfield when we have an offensive line. And then I hope that he doesn't look up which offensive lineman you've gotten in recent years, which I like a lot of the offensive linemen Florida's gotten. Big fan of them. However, I also acknowledge not everybody's going to pan out the way that you think they will. Not everybody's going to develop the way you think they will. And quantity has also just been an issue for the Florida Gators on the offensive line. So that's my selling point of just go back to 2022, show what you can do when you have time there. Another quarterback to talk about, though, Antoine Hill, seems to be down to Florida and Memphis. Where do you think he winds up right now? Personally, I don't think he's going to be a Florida Gator. I know that there's a lot of people out there that do feel that there's a very real chance. I never really bought it with Antoine Hill, though.
We've heard that name forever with UF, haven't we, Brandon? It's been a long time. 2 points. If Florida really had an offer for him forever, why hasn't he committed? And 2, for those that do not know, Memphis, it's obviously in Memphis. Where are the headquarters for? FedEx are. They just gave them a whole bunch of NIL money. And I mean a bunch. He might actually get more NIL by going to Memphis, which is weird. But FedEx is kind of big. So
a little bit. Small company there. Just support small businesses like Federal Express over there. I do have to ask, and I kind of alluded to this before, where I feel like we're both on a side that I don't think a lot of people are, because typically we go, oh, when you're recruiting, you want to have every class with quarterback, running back or two, 3 or 4 receivers, a few offensive linemen, a few D linemen, multiple secondary players, all that stuff. You want to build basically a roster for a team that you can run out there. One string of a depth chart, right? And again, both think you should add a quarterback every class, but I need to know your opinion on not taking a quarterback at all. If you can't get Tramel Jones, if you can't get Antoine Hill, you didn't get Keelan Russell, and there hasn't been much momentum for Florida or even interest for Florida from any blue chip quarterbacks outside of this bunch. Do you just take a QB to take a QB? Personally, I don't. I wouldn't do that. I feel like that's a bad decision. But where do you stand on potentially not taking a quarterback in the 2025 class if you're Florida?
You already got Will Griffin committed next year, one of the top guys. And wasting a scholarship is dumb. And it's the portal era. Worst case scenario, you could use one. I don't think it's as big a deal as some others do, because kids transfer so much anyway. Let it play out. But if you don't get one of the guys you've recruited forever, just let it be. Don't just take a flyer. The only exception to that, if there's a kid that's got a lot of upside, but he can play in multiple positions, like a true receiver DB guy, then maybe. I just have to, you got to evaluate that as it comes. Other than that, like, you got Will Griffin already committed. He's really good. So, and that's 26 quarterback. I think Florida would be okay if they didn't get one.
Yeah, I'm the same way. You got Lagway for the next few years. You have Will Griffin after him. And you just again, there's the possibility that a player like Lagway doesn't work out. Something about it. He feels different. And I guess that's just the best way to put it. It feels like a different scenario there. But we will talk about the defensive players tomorrow. And hopefully the Florida Gators will be able to land a few of those names that we talk about. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast. I am Brandon Olsen. This was Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider and the host of Locked On Seminoles. And we will both see you tomorrow.